Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Prof. Paula, for the warm welcome. There's no pressure on me, I guess, after this, but thank you very much for the warm welcome and also for the privilege to be presenting this morning. The third section of the RECH form. That is the last part to be completed. I just want to make sure you can all see and hear me clearly. My slides are, I can see it on the screen. Just if somebody can just confirm you can hear me clearly.
All good. Can hear and see clearly. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. I appreciate. Okay, colleagues, so yes, we're going to navigate 5 sections of the RECH form. And this is literally the last sections before that final signatures must be on the form. So I'm going to go through this section very systematically with you. So if we look at section 5 of the ethics form, it deals with information to participants. So what is for me nice about our ethics form is that there are different sections, actually 11 sections, that needs to be completed, and each one has a title, a topic, so that guides us in terms of what needs to be included in that section of the RECH form. And I think it was also mentioned yesterday, it is very good to look at the RECH form when you are writing or finalizing your research proposal, because these two documents are married to each other. Okay, so let us look at information to participants. It deals essentially with 2 topics, and then there's a little question that slipped in the middle between recruitment and enrollment. So recruitment is at the stage of where you first try to recruit people to participate in the study. Enrollment is when they actually now are part of the study. So now they are going to do the study with you as a participant. So this is how the ethics form look like for these 5 questions. So the first one, what information will be offered to the participant at the point of recruitment? So there are an Appendix 11A and Appendix 11B that relate to this question or statement. So if you are, well, every single study, if you are recruiting participants, you need to attach written information, Appendix 11A. If it is oral information, Appendix 11B. So that will then be an appendix, hopefully also to your proposal, or it will at least be a section in your proposal, but it will be an appendix to your, in the RECH form. Then, very importantly, who will provide this information to the participant? So type the information provider and then the specific role. So this now depends on your study. Who is going is it going to be only the PI, the principal investigator, which is, if it's a master's or a doctoral study, it is usually principal investigator is our student. It's very rarely the PRP. The PRP is usually for an M or a D, is usually the supervisor. So it can also be a research assistant. It depends very much on the study. So the name of the provider or providers and their specific role must be indicated. Then this question regarding, will the information provided be complete and accurate? So I think for all of us, the gut feel sort of answer is yes, this is a yes answer. Let us move on to the next one. But there are exceptions, and we're going to, on the next slide, I'm going to share with you examples of exceptions. But in most studies, for most studies, this will be, will the information provided be complete and accurate? It is a yes question, because we very rarely want to use deception. Because if we say no, we need to describe the nature and the extent of the deception. And we don't want to deceive people. There's not place for actually for deception in studies, but there are a few exceptions, okay? The 5D and E sort of mirror A and B. but now the focus moves from recruitment to actually enrollment. What information will be offered to the participant at the point of enrollment? That is now when he or she consents to participate. So now this is a further step down. So it's no longer recruitment, it is now enrollment. And similarly, it mirrors A and B, but now it is Appendix 12A and Appendix 12B. So it can be the same information, or it can be slightly different and contain a little bit more. So usually when we do a survey, say it's an online survey, we will send an initial email, and then when people agree to participate in the study and when they actually, after they consented, then, or at the point of when they consent, that is when we give them more information about the study. Again, the same question, who will provide this information to the participant? Is it the PI, the principal investigator, or is it a research assistant? So often at the point of enrollment, it may be a research assistant. At the point of recruitment, it may still be the principal investigator, but it is very much dependent on the study. So this is in essence information to participants. Okay, I don't want to put a lot of emphasis on the Appendix 11 and Appendix 12, written and or oral information at recruitment and at the point of enrollment. And you see it is mandatory. So these are compulsory appendices that have to be added. Okay, I don't want to put too much emphasis on incomplete disclosure and deception. That is section C, this C that we need to answer on the ethics form. Two examples. Example of incomplete disclosure. Say, for example, participants are recruited for a study and they will be asked knowledge questions. But actually, the study is not about testing their knowledge. You actually want to find out if background noise affects their ability to concentrate. But you don't want to reveal that, because if you tell them that upfront, then obviously it may affect their responses. So it may create bias and in the study. So in that case, an ethics committee may say, fine, you reveal to them at the point of recruitment that they will have to answer certain questions and it is based on their knowledge levels, but you're not revealing to them that it is actually their ability to concentrate if it's very noisy. There's grass cutting in the background here today. I hope you're not hearing it. It can distract a person when you need to concentrate on asking questions. So if the study is about that, then that may be acceptable for approval by an ethics committee. Also, sometimes we want to participants to read a list of words, view a series of pictures, but actually we want to test their memory, their recall, but we don't want to tell them that up front. Okay, so it's incomplete disclosure, because there's a part of the study, if we reveal that the study, we're not going to achieve the objectives of the study. Then there's something else that one of my students did quite a number of years ago, mystery shopping, and it's commonly used in marketing studies if you do BCom, or sometimes also pharmaceutical industry. So there's a reference that I've given if you're interested about the ethical considerations of mystery shoppers. So for example, it will be customer going into the pharmacy with a prescription. That was basically the essence of what my student did, and then wanted to find out how do pharmacists counsel on antibiotics that are prescribed? Do they give adequate information? But we didn't want to reveal that when the mystery shopper will be in the pharmacy. So we got permission from the responsible pharmacist, and the pharmacist in the pharmacies were told that there is a project, but they were not told when the mystery shopper will come in and who that person is. Okay, so the person came in with a prescription, and then the researcher or the mystery shopper actually recorded as the antibiotic, and the other items on the prescription or dispense, the mystery shopper / the field worker / the researcher wrote down exactly what that entailed. So that's also deception in a way, but these studies are quite common in marketing. Okay, I don't want to put too much emphasis on this because it's not commonly used. Let us move on to privacy, anonymity, and confidentiality of data. Okay, so this section deals with, will our participants be identified by name? Will their rights be protected? Then, very importantly, data, and then private property, and then secrecy. Okay, so let us look at the this is how the form looks like. Okay, so here we've got A, B, C, D, E, and F. We've got 6 questions or 6 sections that needs to be completed. Very important. There's a block at the beginning of the ethics form. That block with the instruction at the bottom, delete this block before you submit the ethics form. That block that often we sort of scan over and we do not read. That's actually a very important block because that gives us the definitions, the very important definitions, not only for the sections I'm discussing with you today, but also for the other sections. So for this section 6, it defines for us what is the meaning of anonymity. So that is refers to a situation where any data collected does not have any identifying information. It also explains to us privacy and confidentiality. The data will be collected and entrusted. So to the researcher for research purposes only, and it will be protected from unauthorized access, use, disclosure, modification, loss, theft, etc. Okay, so there's a difference between anonymity, privacy, and confidentiality. And then also very important, data for reuse. Often we do not understand this. The definition is the use of data collected and entrusted to researchers in the context of the current study for other research purposes, apart from publication. So this is not, data reuse is not if we say we want to publish articles later on the master study, or for the PhD, if the PhD was not a PhD article, the data will be reused later. That's not data reuse. Data reuse is if you want to use the data in a separate study for another study or a follow-up study later on. So it is not later on using it for a publication that relates to the current study. This is using the data in another context. Okay, so let us quickly look at these 6 questions. Will the participant be identified by name in your research? It's a yes, no. Again, if it is not applicable, you mark not applicable. So in most cases, we do not identify our participants in our research. If we do focus group interviews, we will use a code to identify them. If we use database research, I'm working with big data, large, massive data sets of millions and millions of records. Often, if we do questionnaire surveys, we're not going to say this specific pharmacist in this specific pharmacy. So very seldom that we will identify the participant. There are exceptions, however. Are provisions made to protect the participant's right to privacy and preserve confidentiality? Again, most cases, the answer will be yes here. There are very few exceptions here. C is very important. Will the data collected be stored in any way? Okay, so in most cases, we will store data. And then there are 7 items that we need to respond to. And I'm going on the next slide, we're going to look at these 7 items. So I'm quickly going to skip them. Read what is there under the bullet point, next to the asterisk. Standard practice is that data should be stored by the PRP. So for a master's or a doctoral study, that is usually the supervisor. For the purposes of verification and validation of such data, deviation from standard practice requires motivation. So it can be stored by the student also, but then remember, the M&D student will go, usually after you've completed your studies, you will leave the university. You will no longer be traceable at the university. So that is, the PRP is the staff member, is sort of the constant in this. So data should be stored by the PRP for the purposes of verification and validation. Okay, very important words. Let us quickly look at then D. Will data be made available for reuse in any subsequent research? Okay, that is the reuse. You now understand what it means. It's not for publication purposes. This is, I want to do a postdoc after this with another study. I want to do a comparative study between my data from South Africa with data of Ghana, for example. It's a new study, another study. Okay, so it's not the same study. It's not publication purposes. I want to do a follow-up study. I want to compare. That is reuse. Okay. E, will any part of the data collection be conducted on private property, including shopping centers? Copies of permission to access draft letters to be included. Okay, so I was one supervisor for a study that we conducted at the entrances of shopping centers. So we had to first get ethics approval to conduct the study. It was conducted on private property, so our students went and at various shopping centers in our metro, and we first got our ethics approval. Once we had our ethics number, then only could our students go to the managers of the shopping centers and ask permission of the manager, gatekeeper, the managers. This is the study. This is what the study is about. We need ethics approval. We need approval to stand on these specific dates from this hour to this hour at the entrance of your shopping center or in front of a specific shop. It's not easily allowed. So we had to jump through a few hoops to get that study conducted, but it's not impossible. It is private property, so one cannot just go in, even outside the shopping center. There are rules governing that. Okay, so it's draft letters to be included in Appendix 2. So this is another appendix that relates to the section this morning. If we can't ask permission before we have ethics approval. Okay, so it's not only shopping centers, it can be in front of entrances of churches or creches or whatever. Shopping centers is where our students did the study. It was actually a very interesting study. They allowed in some shopping centers the students to stand just inside the entrance. Other shopping centers were very strict and said the students must not block, and they actually came and checked up on the students when students were the field workers, when they were standing there. Where did they stand? And you're not allowed to harass obviously the people as they move. Sometimes people are in a hurry to go into the shopping center, so how they approach we also had to explain. And it is the right of the shopping centers or the private places to request that information from us. Okay, not because they're difficult, because it is private property, and our students, it is a privilege to work on there or to do research. The last one, are there any contractual secrecy or confidentiality constraints on the data collected? Okay, so in most cases, this will also be a no, but there are exceptions. I had one student who collected data. She actually established the database, and in the end, the study was classified or categorized as we had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So she was limited also then on what she could publish from the study. Similarly, this happens sometimes also in the pharmaceutical industry when you do research on certain processes in industry that is still in its infancy, and you're testing a process. There's constraints on publication of that. So there may be contractual secrecy. Okay, confidentiality. Often this goes with a non-disclosure agreement together with the study. So it means just a form that needs to be completed and signed by the company. In her case, it was a specific medical field. Although the data was de-identified, it was still very sensitive data. So she could publish from her study, but only selected parts of her study, not everything. Okay, and the thesis is also not available, publicly available in the Nelson Mandela University Library, like normally the case is. Let us go back to C, because that's very important. Okay, so we've spoken about those two. So C is asking, will data be stored in any way? So if we say yes, data collected would have to be stored for data analysis and verification. By whom? Data must be stored by the PRP, but it can also be the PRP and the PI. How many copies? Okay, so indicate how many copies would be stored. So I've seen recently proposals saying only one copy. There's a little risk for me if we say only one copy. I want to say at least one copy must obviously be stored. But one copy, depending on where you store it, the building may burn down if it is an hard copy. If it is a soft copy, it is an electronic copy. A file can get corrupted. So I want to see at least a backup copy, 1 or 2 backup copies, but safely and securely stored. Okay, so indicate how many copies, need to be specific there. 1 copy, 2 copies stored, and it will be where it will be stored. You're not going to say in the filing cabinet in my office in building 120258. We're not going to be that specific, but it is going to be a description of where it will be stored. For how long? Okay, data must be stored for 5 years for validation and audit purposes. So that is sort of the 5 years is the rule. There may be exceptions where you want to store it for longer. If you want to reuse the data, maybe you want to store it longer. If it is shorter, you need to motivate. For what reasons? Okay, it's for validation and audit purposes. The reason for the storage, it's often because we also want to publish later on, or the publishers may come back to us and ask, they may audit. I had one of my publications where they came back and they asked questions about the data, and luckily we followed the processes and we could show the data. It is the right of journals to also do that within reason. Then, how will the data be secured from unauthorized access? So it's hard copies, a locked filing cabinet or locked somewhere, and only limited access by PRP or whatever. How are the consent assent forms stored in relation to the other data collected? Why is this important? Because there's if we separate our data forms, SAID's questionnaire survey, we separate that from our consent forms, there may still be an identifier, a code that we've used to link the two. So this is to ensure absolute anonymity and privacy of the data, so confidentiality. So then we will often say the consent assent forms will be stored separately in another room or in a separate location, so that the two are it's not next to each other, because then it may be possible to link and identify by name. It can also, what we often see here is by, if it's a computer file, it is with keywords, that the data will, in my case where I work on big data, often it is on with keywords, and it will often be served as I'm saving on the server of the university where the security is very strict. Okay, then if we look at number 7, what will become of the data upon conclusion of the study? How will it be disposed of? Okay, how will it, in other words, be permanently deleted? We can say it is either the file will be permanently deleted, or if it is hard copies, it will be shredded, permanently disposed of. But we need to write that in a little phrase, a little sentence. We can not just say a yes, no, or skip. Our ethics committee, very strict. Each one of these questions must be answered. Feedback. Okay, we need there not too long until the end of this presentation. Will feedback be given to participants? A yes or a no? If yes, specify whether feedback will be written, oral, or by other means, and describe how this is to be given. Okay. If no, motivate why it is not possible to provide participants with feedback. So if we look at the definition in that block at the start of our ethics form, feedback refers to the sharing of findings. Our participants, possibly you want to share with them, but you also may want to share with other sources, sponsors, gatekeepers, the community, later on. It is preferred that participants at least be the recipients of some form of summarized feedback. But now, very importantly, where you see the yellow arrow, it does not mean send after completion of your study your whole treatise, dissertation, or thesis in an email to the participant. That is not what the intention here is. We usually say for the participants, if they want feedback, if there's an article, or you can write a 1 or 2 page, a short report, and you can share that with them. Because many of our studies, it is community focused, and we want to give feedback to our participants. If it is the sponsors, gatekeepers, it can also be in the form of a short report. We often present also our research at conferences, so that can also be made known to other sources that this will be presented at a conference, or even at an article that has been published can then be shared, or the reference can be given to them. B relates to if you are working in a primary or secondary school or institutional setting. Will feedback be provided? Okay, so there's very specific rules guiding if we do studies on schools, in a school setting or institutional settings. Okay, so B relates to that. But feedback, it is good because it also we get information. It is good to share back with our participants especially. But in some cases we may decide not to share, but then we just need to motivate here. Ethical and legal aspects, okay, quite an easy, I think this is an easy section to complete. It deals with documents and it relates to a reference list. It refers specifically to the Belmont report and then any additional information. So it refers, A, to the DOH Research Ethic Guidelines to 2015, page 12, and that is the Ethics in Health Research 2015. So here you see the Belmont report, you see Declaration of Helsinki, you see the guidelines for ethics, the MRC, Singapore Statement, okay, so you see there are more than these 1.8.3, there's a lot more. Guideline for good clinical practice. So the question is, the following documents are relevant and will be included in the references of any publication emanating from the study. So we do expect that these references, if they relate to your study and they're important, they need to be included in your reference list, and then also in any other subsequent publications coming from your study. The PRP and PI declare that they are familiar with at least the contents of the Belmont report and that it will be included in the reference. So it needs to be in your proposal, Belmont report, and maybe even the Declaration of Helsinki and maybe some of the others as well. And if not, you need to motivate. Ideally, we want to see them. And then the last one is, I would like Rec H to take note of the following information. Type response here or select none. Most of the proposals will, the proposals will have a none here, but it's a very useful place if you want to declare anything else, or if there's any exception to your study that you could not include anywhere else, this is the place where I usually type my few words or my few sentences. Okay, so ethics in health research, important, read through that document. And then the Belmont report, it's not a very long document. Read through it so that you really understand the 3 ethics principles: beneficence, justice, respect for persons. Also go through the Declaration of Helsinki. It's yes, it's academic, but it must not only be names in our minds. It actually needs to be live reports. These are so important in ethics. Then very last section, declaration, any potential conflicts of interest, and then the signatures. What is a conflict of interest? It refers to a compromise situation as regards ethical conduct of research as a result of conflicting duties, responsibilities, or interests. I've got shares in Aspen, and I'm a part-time staff member of Aspen. And I'm going to do a study on Aspen, but I'm not going, some other process or procedure or experimentation happening. And I'm not declaring that. There's huge harm to be done if we are hiding, if we are not being open. So there's very little risk to declare conflict of interest. People understand, you're open, and then you can do the study without any hesitation. So this is on the part of the PI and the PRP and any participant or gatekeeper or sponsor of the study. Okay, so we really want to do our studies in the most ethical way, meaning that if there's any conflict of interest, we declare. Like we go into meetings, if I've got a vested interest, I have to declare it. If I'm involved in a study and I've got a vested interest, I have to declare it. Last section is just signatures. I am not aware of potential conflicts of interest. If I am, declare it. There's no harm done. Ethics committees are objective. They will take that into account. And then the PRP and the PI must sign, and these are the appendices that relate to the sections we've dealt with now. Appendix 2, 11A and B, Appendix 12A and B, the written and the oral. And with that, I'm saying thank you very much to you. Ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right. And that is on our website, our research website. Thank you very much for listening. This is a nice section, I think, easy section of the RecH form. Enjoy your research, and Prof. Paula, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Prof. Truter. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. We will have space for some questions. I think we have 2 questions or so from the chat box. And one was actually requesting if the RecH committee could consider having a pre-recorded video that would describe the sections of the RecH and all that. I don't think, Prof. Truter, do you want to make a comment there, or do you suggest we just take it forward to RecH?
Prof. Paula, I think that needs to go to RecH. If you look on the Mandela Research Mandela website, there are little videos that you can look at also there. I think many of us miss that, but there are little videos that can help us to with the completion of the ethics form. But maybe it is something that you can take to Prof. Soji and you can take to the to RecH committee as well. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you so much. Then the next question was asking how different or similar is the RecH to the RecA, besides the fact that RecA is for research involving the use of animals.
Thank you very much. I'm so privileged to be a member of the Research Ethics Committee Animal of the university. The 2 forms are different, but there are also similarities. So the structure, It's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. It is the form is the format is similar, but obviously we also ask about sample size, how many animals will be used, how, if any animals will be sacrificed. I'm a pharmacist by training, so there's a section on will any medicines be administered for euthanasia, for example. What will be the method of euthanasia? There are also questions similar to our ethics form about the objectives of the study, the training of the people involved in the study, if it is for research purposes. So similarities, definitely. Format very similar to Rec-H, but the focus is very much on the protection of the rights of animals. So it is very much, will animals be harmed in any way? If they are, well, if they will be transported, how in detail we need to describe how they will be transported. If they are kept in cages, are the cages big enough? How many animals per cage of so many meters by, or centimeters by so many meters? Who will take responsibility for the feeding of the animals, for looking after the animals? So it is, and it relates also strongly to our animal holding facility, which is in the basement of building 12, the biology building. So yeah, Prof. Paula, that's the short answer. I can carry on for a long time about animal ethics. There's also specialized training that we did end of last year. Prof. Bergmoor did a 2-day training course with us as members of the Animal Ethics Committee. Animal Ethics Committee needs to have a vet as one of its members, similar to our Ethics Committee, where we want a medical doctor to be part of the Ethics Committee. So very much similar, but also different. Thanks, Prof.
No,
Paula.
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. Truter. That is totally correct. And may I also crave the indulgence of our staff and students to please go to the website. You know, if you go to the research, you will see under the entities, you also see the Rec-H and Rec-A, and you see all the forms available for the Rec-A. It's actually very clear, and you know, you can follow those procedures. And the similar request on Rec-H is also put forward for Rec-A. So I think we'll have to communicate the Rec-H to see how they could actually, maybe via IMTIAS or the chairs. Thank you so much. And that is the last question, but there is a comment I would like to read here on the chat box. That comment says, thank you, Prof. Truter, for your presentation and comprehensive overview. It is crystal clear, and you are still as brilliant as you were 17 years ago when you lectured me in pharmacy. So guys, can we please just put our hands together for Professor Truter? Thank you so much, Prof, for that insightful presentation. We truly appreciate it. And I'm sure that the slides will be available, and please feel free to contact Prof anytime for further details. Thank you so much.
Thank you.